Okay, let's continue. Apex is in the cloud. Apex is interacting with our multi-tenant database, and it's running on multi-tenant application servers. In other words, they are shared resources up there in the cloud. If you are interested in more details on Salesforce as a multi-tenant platform, if you go search developer.force.com for multi-tenant architecture, there's both a white paper and a 1-hour recording of a webinar where a lot of our developers are talking about the way it works. It's a very detailed technical discussion, but if you are a person who's interested in that and also very knowledgeable on databases, it might be worth watching. Okay? So as developers, you're going to be developing code in a tool like, let's say, the Force.com ID or using one of our browser-based tools. When you save that code, it's going to be uploaded to the Salesforce servers where it will be compiled up on the server. If it is successfully compiled, it is now another piece of metadata associated with your org, and so we'll store it in your metadata database associated with that org. The next request that comes in, once it's been successfully compiled, if this code is associated with something that request is doing, it's going to modify the behavior of that request. So let's just say that we created a trigger. Our end user now goes out, saves that record up to the server, that modifies that request, executes your code, and then changes the behavior of that operation. Okay. The key thing I'd like you to understand here is that Apex, from the standpoint of our customers, Apex is supported in the Enterprise and the Unlimited Edition. You can create Apex code in Developer Edition. But the key thing I'd like you to take away from this slide is that because we have test coverage requirements in production, you're going to want to write your Apex code in your sandboxes and ultimately deploy it from your sandboxes up to production, okay? It is possible to write code directly in production, but like I said, we're going to execute those tests, so it's something you don't want, you typically don't want to do. So our sandboxes are the environments that we use for doing our Apex development, and I'll talk about the deployment process later on to migrate those code changes from our sandboxes up to production. There are a number of different tools which are available for you in terms of writing your code. One is we have some browser-based tools. There's the setup menu, so you can go into setup and then develop Apex classes, or go into create objects and you can define new Apex triggers. So you can do it that way, or for that matter, now through the developer console, you can edit or create new Apex classes or triggers. Now, the number one tool that people use, though, as opposed to those browser-based environments, is the Force.com ID. Force.com ID is a plugin to Eclipse. We'll be installing it as a part of our first set of lab exercises. But it's just that. It's a plugin to Eclipse that Force.com enables that environment so that you can write your code and compile it. There's a number of different features with the Force.com ID, and what I'm going to do right now is let me just do a quick little demo of the environment, and then we'll do some labs where you can install it yourselves. So in my case, what I have is on my laptop, I have Eclipse 3.6.2 already installed. 3.6.2 is the latest version of the Force.com, or the latest version of Eclipse that is officially supported by the Force.com ID. I've launched Eclipse, and just so you know, I can use this environment to do a number of different things. We're going to have you later on create a Force.com project, but a Force.com project is analogous to a project, a Java project or some other project that you're working on within the Force.com ID. A Force.com project is implicitly connected to an org. Because the compiler and the execution environment is in the cloud, we must connect our project up to that environment, okay? So don't follow along. I'll just do this demo, and then later on I'll give you the time to do this on your own. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter in credentials for that org that I'm developing in. And so in my case, I'm going to enter in admin@dev501.com. The way that our sandboxes work is that we take the name of the sandbox and we append it onto our username. So whereas we logged in with admin@dev501, we would log in with admin@dev501.number.com.devorg. So if you think about it, if you have 5 sandboxes associated with your one production environment, the way that we tell apart those different sandboxes is based on the unique name, and you append it onto the end to make that user ID unique. I'm going to enter in my password at this point, and so there we go, enter in that password. Alternatively, if I'm connecting up via a place that's external to one of my trusted IP ranges, I could use a security token. In my case, I'm inside of the IP range, so I'm just going to enter that, or I'm going to leave that blank. Now you'll notice that there are some different options for the environment. The reason is that when you log into a sandbox, you do it via a different front door than you do when you're logging into a production environment. So a key difference between logging into production versus logging into a sandbox is when we log into production, we go to login.salesforce.com. When we log into a sandbox, we go to test.salesforce.com. So the environment here is all about setting that URL to be the proper front door for logging into Salesforce. Because I'm showing you a login to a sandbox, I need to make sure I select sandbox, which, like I said, is behind the scenes, is going to go out to test.salesforce.com. It's going to check my credentials, make sure that I am able to do what I just requested, which is to log in, and I was able to successfully log in. Now, the next thing I'd like to point out is the manifest, if you will, of what I want to include within this project. When I'm defining a project, I have a number of different options. But at the end of the day, the key thing to understand is that a project can contain, and typically will contain, a subset of your metadata associated with that org. So you can create as many projects as you want, but normally you're going to create them associated with a specific, task or specific goal in mind. So for instance, in my case, I'm currently working on a project where I'm creating a Visualforce wizard that uses Visualforce controllers. In my case, I created a simple project that just contains those pages and those classes which are necessary to make that to work. Now, if you wanted to, you could also just include everything, but in doing that, in this case here, I'm going to select all the metadata components. Just to understand that there is a limit on the total number of components that you can include within a project. And so it's currently 1,500. So you might hit that limit, in which case you need to identify what components you want to include. Because our org is brand new, I'm just going to do select all. And all it's going to do is include all the different pieces of metadata. But at the end of the day, it's really not that, it's not that much because our org is very small. But here are all the different types of metadata that are supported by that metadata API. So not only is it things like Visualforce pages and Apex classes and triggers, it's also things like your object definitions, your applications, your tabs, your page layouts. All those different things are pieces of metadata that we publish and make accessible to you via the metadata API. And so this tool, and using this tool, we are using that metadata API to download what are ultimately XML definitions of those components. So I'm just going to include everything for the sake of doing this demo and click on OK. And then you'll see that there's a large number of things which are included within that project. I'm going to click on Finish, and what's going to happen is it's now going to do that bulk download from the Salesforce servers, copy all that metadata down to my local project. So now what I'm going to have on my local file system, so the way the Eclipse works, and when you're launching Eclipse, you identify a workspace. A workspace is just a local directory that contains the copies of, in the case of Java, your Java source code. In the case of Force.com IDE, definitions of your Apex classes, your Visual Force pages, your objects, etc. Okay? So in creating this project called Dev 501 Sandbox Demo, I've now downloaded my different metadata components into this project. What you'll see in a Force.com project is this source folder. And the source folder contains the different types of metadata in subfolders. So the source is the root, and then you'll see, for instance, a folder for things like objects and classes and so on. So if I wanted to, one of the things I could do is I could scroll down here to where it has objects, and I could take a look at the definition of, let's say, my candidate object by locating that object within this tree and double-clicking on it. So here's my candidate object. I'm going to double-click on that object, and it will launch that definition. Now, in my case, I'm viewing this in the source view, but understand that at the bottom of this tab, there's the design view, which has this sort of graphical, this sort of GUI tree view of the object definition. And then there's the source view, which shows the raw XML of the metadata definition of this object. Okay? So this XML file, notice that it has, for instance, object properties. It has fields. So here's a list of different fields. I can scroll down here if you think about the kind of stuff that you identify or that you build within an object. There's also things like the org-wide default, the sharing model. Notice that there's validation rules. There's definitions of search layouts. Okay, so there's all different types of information stored within list views. All different types of metadata stored within this object definition. All right, so the way that this works is that if I go in here and I decide to make a change, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little demo here, and I'm going to modify some of the metadata associated with the city field on my candidate object. Okay? And I'm going to do a really basic thing, which is I'm going to change the label, the default label for the city field. Okay? So back in my org, first of all, one of the things that I need to do is I need to log in via the web browser to my org just so I can show you the changes that I've made applied to the system. So I'm going to log out of production right now, and I'm going to log into my sandbox. And the way that I do that is I need to change my URL from login.salesforce.com to test.salesforce.com. I'm going to log in by entering in my credentials, so admin at dev.org, right? And then my password is the same, password, and then the number 1. So I'm now going to log in to my sandbox organization using that dev.org credential. And just to show you, first of all, notice that there's this black tab up here indicating that I'm currently logged into a sandbox. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate to my setup menu, and so I'm going to go to the setup menu, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here to create objects. All right, and then I'm going to click on my candidate object in order to view that. Okay. All right, the candidate object has that city field, and so you'll notice that I can take a look through my setup menu at that definition. So what I'm going to do is in the Force.com IDE, I'm going to modify that label. And so I'm going to change city to village. Okay? So by editing this XML file, clicking on the Save button, what's going to happen is that you'll notice down here it says Building Workspace. One of the things that by default the Force.com IDE, it's set up to automatically build your project. In our case, building means pushing from your local PC up to the Salesforce servers for compilation. Okay? Now you can always turn build automatically off by just unchecking that checkbox. But this is the quicker way. Every time you save, it then gets uploaded and compiled up there. Now in this case, you'll notice that I have no problems. But just to show you, let's say I introduce a typo. So I'm going to put a typo inside of one of my tags. If I did have a problem, you'll notice here now it says, oh, there's an error. Okay, so it's going to complain. It also identifies that there's a problem on line 51, and it says it can't parse the XML file because I messed up one of my tags. Okay, so in this case I need to get rid of that character, click on Save again, and then that definition will be uploaded up to the server. Next thing I want to show you is back in my web browser, I'm going to refresh the definition of my candidate object. And you'll notice that my city field is gone. And I need to scroll down to the V area. And you'll notice that by changing that XML document, I now have a village field, but at the end of the day, the API name is still city_C. Okay? Sound good? All right, so let's move this one step further. As a developer, I decided that I want to change the label of this field. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in to my definition through the web browser, and I'm going to click on Edit next to this field, and I'm going to change Village to Metropolis. Okay. So I'm going to click on Save. It's going to say, are you sure you want to do this? Yes, I do. So I'm going to save my new field definition. And so now instead of village, I now have the Metropolis label associated with my city field. All right, back down in the Force.com IDE, what do you think I'm going to see within that XML file if I close it down and reopen it? What's that? It'll pull it, you think? Okay. That is one of the things that it actually does not do, okay? Good guess, good guess. Good guess. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to close down my candidate object definition, and I'm going to reopen it. Okay. And when I scroll down to my city field, you'll notice that the label is still set to village. Okay. So the Force.com IDE, the way it works is that it automatically will push your definitions up to the cloud if you set build automatically. What it will not do is it will not automatically pull those definitions down to the IDE. You must explicitly say that you want to pull those down.
Even if you close the project and reopen it, that time also it doesn't pull the management.
Doesn't do it. So just to show you, one of the things that you can do within our environment is you can go in here and you can take a project and you can right click on it and you can say close the project, right? And then you can say I want to open the project, and it's just activating it. It's not doing anything with respect to network traffic to reconnect that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one step further, and I'm going to make a change to the local file. Okay, so I've decided that I don't want to label my city field. I don't want to label it Metropolis. I don't want to label it Village. I want to change it back to the way it originally was, and I want to change it back to City. So I'm going to scroll down here to my label, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to change Village to City, and I'm now going to save the file. What's going to happen is the new definition of the object is going to be saved up to the server. But Salesforce is going to complain because there's a problem, all right? And the problem is a feature that you're probably used to seeing when you're working with a source control repository, which is we have a synchronization error, okay? So the definition that exists up there on the Salesforce servers is newer than the original copy that I had on my local file system. And so when it saves it up there, it goes, wait a minute, I don't want to overwrite that definition because someone in the meantime made a change to that definition, and so I have a conflict, okay? And so when we take a look down here, if we take a look at this error message, what it says is save error, conflict found while preparing to save the candidate object up to the cloud, all right? Now, as a developer, you have a few choices here, okay? Now, one of the things that you're able to do, if I right-click on here, on my candidate object, and I can do this on the objects folder, I can do it on the entire source folder, you'll notice that there's this menu item, force.com. And with the force.com menu, there's a number of different things that I can choose to do associated with this object. The first is refresh from server. And what this says is take whatever the definition is up there in the metadata database up on salesforce.com, take that definition, download it, and overwrite my copy of the definition, my local copy. The second option that I have is save to server. Save to server does the exact opposite. Take my local definition and upload it and overwrite the copy that exists up there in the metadata database up there on the cloud. Now the third option is synchronize with server. And what this does is it says, all right, I want you to do a diff. I want you to compare my local copy to the server copy. And so what this does is it opens up this view where you can see that there's a conflict with the candidate object. I can right click and use the compare editor that exists within the Eclipse tool. And what it does is it compares the definition of my local copy to my server, my remote copy. Okay? And so now one of the things I might want to do, I might want to, if there are possibly multiple conflicts within this file, maybe I want to, take some of the changes that occurred up on the server and apply those locally. Number of different things we can do there. But I ultimately, if I did have that type of situation, I would need to manually go in, make changes to the local file, and then upload those changes to the server, and now I've manually synchronized those two definitions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close this down. I'm going to switch back to my force.com perspective. Let me close this down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that save to server option. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to select force.com, save to server, and I'm going to say I want you to overwrite. It says this is a dirty copy. Are you sure you want to do this? Yes, I do. And so I want to overwrite the server definition with my local definition. And now when I go back to my web browser and I click on, so right now I have my Metropolis field. I'm going to do a refresh on this page, and you'll notice that what we have here is the city field now has the city label. Okay? So one of the things that you must understand is that when we're working with a metadata database that exists for every Salesforce org, there is only one copy of anything up there at any given moment in time, okay? So unlike a source control repository where we could create a new branch and create a copy of all these, different definitions and have multiple versions of what is ultimately the same thing, with the Salesforce metadata database, there's only one copy of anything. So it is not, even though it does have some, source code or control repository features, it is not intended to replace, something like Subversion or anything like that. If you're using, let's say something like GitHub, you're using Subversion, Perforce, SourceSafe, any of those other systems, they all have plugins within Eclipse. So you could take, because these are ultimately, they're just files you can take these definitions in file format, check them into a source control repository, create new branches. Multiple developers can be working on different things, but ultimately, as I said before, the Salesforce metadata database it does not support multiple branches or that concept of, checking out or checking in or locking or something like that. Okay? There's a number of other tools which are available in the Force.com IDE. So let me walk you through some of those other features which exist. One of them is the fact that we can go into what's called the schema browser. So the schema browser is here under the source folder is the salesforce.schema. And when you double click on this, it opens up the schema browser. And the schema browser is essentially a tool which allows you to view your objects and the fields associated with those objects and the relationships that exist between your objects, okay? So over on the right-hand side, this is a tree of all of the different objects within my org. So one of the things I might want to do is I might want to go down to Job Application, and so down here under Job Application, there's an entry in the tree for Job Application _C. I can expand this, and what you'll see is metadata associated with a job application. Now, one of the key pieces of metadata are the fields on that object. And so what I can do is I can expand the fields, and these are all the different fields on the job application object. One of the things that this also does, so in addition to having displaying all the different fields with their API names and their labels and all that kind of stuff, it also shows relationships. So in our case, job application does a lookup to the position object. So here I can expand position, and you'll see that it has the position _C field, the position _R. We'll talk about more about that later. But the data type is a reference, and it is a reference to the position object. And you'll notice that it then displays all the different fields on a position object. Okay? So it shows the relationship one level up. Okay? It also shows the relationship one level down. So a job application also has a child relationship with a number of different objects. So here, underneath fields is the child relationships tree. So I'm going to expand that branch, and here are all the different child relationships. A lot of these are standard relationships. So things like your activities, in other words, your events and your tasks and so on. But some of these are custom. So for instance, we have review is a child to a job application. And there it is under review _C. So I can expand this, and what you'll see is that there is a relationship name, reviews _R, that I can use to refer to the review child records. Okay? So it's a very useful tool because we can view our object metadata, get those API names, things like data types, and then see the relationships one level up and see the relationships one level down. Although these days we have the schema browser tool in the web browser, which gives you that graphical representation, which is located here under, so the schema builder under deploy. Within your setup menu, this is a much more intuitive way to see the different relationships because it actually draws the diagram. Okay? Now, the other capability of the schema browser is it has the ability to dynamically generate SOQL queries using a point-and-click interface. So we can go in to the schema browser, and you'll notice that there are some empty checkboxes available to us. So for instance, if I want to search for job applications, let's say I want to click on, let's search the value of the name field, the value of the ID field, And over here on the left-hand side, it dynamically generates a SOQL query for me. So in other words, select name and ID from job application _C. So I can click Run Me, and what it does is it goes out to the database and it performs the query and returns back a list of results for the fields that I selected. We can also do relationship queries. So for instance, I can select a job application and also select related position data associated with that. So one of the things I can do under fields is I can go down to that position. I can expand the reference to, and then maybe I want to select the job title associated with that job application. So now I'm going to click on Run Me, and what's going to happen is it's going to return back not only the job application data, but it also returns the associated position data. And so one of the things I can do for every job application that has an associated position, I can click on it, and then you'll notice that in this case, the job title, in other words, the value of the name field for the position record, the associated position record, is DBA. Okay, in other words, database administrator. All right. So you can select from the current table or from different parent tables. In addition, you can also select child records. So for a given job application, I can also select the related review. So let's say I'm going to select the experience scores. So I can select that field on a child relationship. It also dynamically generates that query. I click on Run Me. Now you'll notice that there's a little bit of a difference between the way that we display children. And the reason is that with child records, you can have 0, 1, or many child records. And that's exactly what we're seeing in the parentheses, is the number of associated child records. So now I can view the experience scores. So here I can double click on reviews _R, and in this case there are 2 review records. The first one has a value of 2.0, the second one has a value of 1.0 for those scores. Okay? There's a few other things that we can do within this environment. We can execute our Apex tests. We'll be doing that on Wednesday. You can also do an anonymous block. So let me just show you the way an anonymous block works. I can enter in some source code. So I can go in here and say I want to create a new position. So position _C. Actually, let's do an account. So account A equals new account, open close parenthesis, semicolon, and then I'm going to set the name of that account to be equal to Chris. Actually, that's a poor name for an account. Let's call this Chris Corp. I have big plans. All right, so Chris Corp, semicolon, and then I'm going to do insert A. So now simply 3 lines of code. I instantiated a new account object representing a record. I set the value of the name field, and then I'm going to insert it into the database. So I'm going to click on the execute anonymous, and then what's going to happen is it's going to come back and say, hey, we executed this, and it says that it completed successfully. Back in my web browser, so if I go out to my sales application now, and I click on my accounts tab, you'll notice that when I take a look at all my accounts, there's now an account called Chris Corp. Okay? So anonymous blocks execute code up on either a production or a sandbox environment. And when you say insert this into the database or delete this from the database, it does just that. So the changes that you make associated with what you do here are committed to the database. Okay? All right. Another thing that I'd recommend is you can also use the help. This is kind of nice because the first time you use it, I won't do it now, but the first time you use it, it'll create a search index. And so it's just a very useful way of searching through our documentation. Using that help, we basically by default download the documentation as a part of the Force.com ID. And like I said, in my opinion, it's actually pretty superior to whether it's the HTML or the PDF, because it does an indexed search. I guess you could use Google at the end of the day, but this is doing sort of a search engine search, and so you can search for keywords and their existence within the documentation. So, all right, let's do this. So I talked about a number of the key features within the Force.com IDE. I talked about creating a project, talked about editing source code. We talked about Execute Anonymous. Talked about the schema browser, the schema explorer. So let's do this. Let's work on exercise 1-2. Let's install the Force.com IDE, and let's also create our first Force.com project. The instructions are in the course guide.